Hello, Something Guys and Gals. This is Something Guy 912, welcoming you back to Half-Life 2 in terms of architecture for the time being with D1 underscore Eli underscore 01, kicking off the short Black Mesa East chapter of this game. Once again, I will be doing this weekly up until I complete this chapter, which comprises of just 2 maps, as I focus my interest and ire towards Wednesday Season 2. With that out of the way, let's dissect this map. Alright, and now we are properly in the map. And this one's probably not going to be very long since there's not a whole lot to discuss about this map since it's mainly an interlude to the Ravenholm chapter. Just a nice little reprieve from all the craziness of Water Hazard and all that. Starting off, before we go into the Black Mesa East itself, should take a note of these little generators here since I think these are supposed to comprise the dam that we just jumped off on earlier, and obviously they do not have any amount of connection to the whole of that dam, so I don't know what these would be generating, because, like, notable examples like the Hoover Dam have these generators at the bottom of the basin of the Colorado River, and are connected to the top most part of that dam to generate electricity. So just they had the thought of mind to put that there because that's just an aspect of a dam, but didn't really consider trying to connect it to said dam. Anyway, we will move on in, and I have no target set to off this time because obviously I need to interact with the NPCs, or the NPCs need to be aware of me so I can get through some of these sections. So obviously go through this section. We get stopped, and we go through the decontamination process. Now, what I find kind of interesting is all the bay doors for Black Mesa East are comprised of these shipping container doors. And the reason this is odd is because of the fact that they have these, advanced weird infrared scanners and all that, like those cameras that were pointing at us earlier and all that. Like, they have this high-tech, stuff for the decontamination bay, but yet they're using shipping container doors. It's just a little bit of a weird mismatch there. So we're just gonna cut on through here because we don't need to introduce ourselves to Mossman and all that. Before we take a trip over here to the left, there's this little small corridor with a fence and a door here. And something I noticed was the fence has to stop at this little jut right here to not collide with this vent. Which, hey, at least it didn't just, give up and just have it clip into the vent, but it causes this weird gap to be here, regardless, or as a result of that. So it's like you fix one problem, or you account for one problem, but you cause another problem to emerge. And then over here, we have kind of a look of the... kind of seems like a silo, because of, all these, half concentric interiors. But obviously, I'm not really sure if this is entirely cohesive. It seems like it is. Obviously, looking out of bounds, it's not, because, they're not going to fully texture this all in. Although, when I was scrolling through here, I did come across this oddity, which is the unfinished refugee model, which is weird because the unfinished refugee model, you can kind of see it when you're going down the elevator with Mossman in the kitchen section. But now, he's not there, but he's just here. But yeah, you can kind of see how poorly textured he is. Just interesting that that was just something that they just kind of left in. Obviously, far away from prying eyes, but regardless. And then, before we go into the elevator itself, you may recognize this as the same elevator that we went with Alex. And this is just, obviously, a concession, because if you have an asset, you should use it. There shouldn't be a reason that you have to just remake an entirely new, elevator platform if the one that you have already works. So, of course, this kind of elevator would be pretty impractical for what is this silo that has been, you know, repurposed as Black Mesa East, but, you know, that's just what they gotta do. That's these concessions you gotta make for the sake of brevity and time and budget. Now we're just going to cut through here. There's not really much to say about each of the individual, like, floors that we see as we go down the elevator shaft. I mean, obviously, they're not, like, complete, you know, they end at certain points, but, again, you weren't ever supposed to go in here in the first place, so there's nothing too out of the ordinary in some of these floors. It seems like it's all, you know, mostly cohesive with what we assume to be. One thing that is notable in one of the floors is we have this generator section where we see the Vortigons, you know, zap the generators, or I think these are generators, and we have this, like, weird, like, I don't know if it's a rail line or some kind of wire connector, but if we go further in, you can see that the texture, they kind of just eventually give up on it and just, like, go for just having them crisscross, well, not crisscross, but just, like, essentially copy and paste this way. And I'm pretty sure, oh, it's kind of hard to tell because it's, let's see, would you be able to see it? Yeah, you kind of can if you know, by chance had the, well, fortunately I don't have the zoom, button like you do in Half-Life 2, but I imagine if you were to play Half-Life 2 and zoom in, you might be able to see that, texture give up. Anyway, we will go down to the base, and we go to the teleporter, or the other side of the teleporter section that we saw briefly during the teleporter screw-up. And, you know, I went and compared and contrast, and it does fall in line with what little we see of it. Obviously, the section of this side of Black Mesa East that we do see has a lot less textures to it, like, as a whole. Like, there's not this little section here, half of this mechanism is missing, there's no teleport, or there's no, elevator platform here, or I think there's a door here, but it could be just a solid wall, but, you know, again, brevity. And then, the only other thing to note about this area is the ladder platform that Alex is climbing up to. I don't know why there would be a ladder platform set up in this way just for her to just fudge around with this mechanism. I'm assuming it's the teleporter mechanism because obviously it screwed up, although that was on Kleiner's side, not on their side, but that's besides the point. It just seems a little weird that you would just have a ladder platform just for this and for basically nothing else. And of course, you know, you can just peruse around, and of course we have this little curiosity, which is basically an ode to a cut enemy in the beta. Which is funny that the Cremator constantly gets introduced in, like, the opening stages of a Half-Life title, but then gets cut, because that was the same fate of the Cremator when they made Half-Life Alyx, that they had plans to put that in the game, but they cut him out last minute again. It's just forever, you know, forever left to the wayside for the developers to try to, you know, put him in where applicable. And then they're going to go on their bicker, and then we're going to go into the area where we get the gravity gun. Now, the area that Alex comes in, and throughout a lot of the sections, the corridors that you walk across, you have these, like staircase corridors that obviously lead to nothing, but they're not colliding with anything, so they could lead to something. But let's keep in mind the path that we go when we go into the bay, especially the path that we go when we go into Ravenholm, because it's going to cause some problems for the area that we just left from, which was the dam, because of the assumed geometry of where Ravenholm would be relative to Black Mesa East and the dam section. Because I think there was this Reddit post where there was a huge top-down section of the entire progress through Half-Life 2, where you can see some of the geometry literally collides with certain things from the assumed geometry of other maps. But that's going to be something for the Ravenholm chapter. It's not going to be for this, for the time being. And then, oddly enough, the last thing to discuss that was a little bit odd to me was this little thing here. So, you have a fence gate that is blocking off just a single door. Now, this may seem a little bit impractical, but I have personally seen a real world anecdote for this. So I work at a warehouse, just delivery and all that. We have the interior warehouse where we, shuffle off boxes in these trailers, and then the actual yard. And access to the interior to that yard is separated by a door with a cage fence. And this is made such to keep too many people from going in and out of the yard, because they want to make sure people don't get hit or ran over by trucks that are trying to load in or drop off trailers. And they, restrict how many people can go in at once. Like, only one person can scan themselves in at a time to go in and out of these warehouse and the yard. Now, obviously, there's not any of that here. It's just a fence gate. So I don't know if this would have served the same purpose, but there would be a practical reason for this to be here if it did serve that purpose. And with that, that is it for D1_Eli_01. And that was it for that map. Hope to see you next week when I post the next one.